There's no doubt that philosophy covers an enormous range of questions, but traditionally, those questions have been classified or categorized into four major branches: ethics, logic, epistemology, and metaphysics. In the following video, we're going to explore what each of these branches of philosophy is primarily concerned with. As I mentioned, nothing's set in stone here, although I would say up until like a couple decades ago, this was pretty much the standard breakdown. So I call it the traditional kind of categorical breakdown. Right, we have epistemology, or anything like kind of knowledge related. That's known as epistemology. So kind of a fancy word for us now, but this will be like second nature this term. Because so after our introduction here at the first part of this first section, we'll move into epistemology at the end of this first section, right? So we're going to be talking about, rationalism versus empiricism. So that's a famous debate about how we get our knowledge. So assuming we have knowledge, how did we get it? Is experience required for all knowledge, as the empiricists like Locke suggest? Or do we come pre-programmed, if you will, kind of knowing certain things, right? Is experience not required for all knowledge, as some of the rationalists like Descartes will say, right? So that's just one example of a debate within epistemology. So how do we get the knowledge that we have? Do we even have any knowledge? What even is knowledge? What does it mean to even know something? That might seem like, well, duh, it's just me, well, what is it, right? So once you start, it might seem like it's pretty obvious, but the second you start kind of like, well, what is it? You'll realize it's a lot trickier to kind of get a handle on, well, what exactly it actually means to know something than you might originally think. Okay? So we'll talk about, Plato's traditional classic notion that knowledge is true, justified belief, right? It has these three criteria. We'll talk about that. That's been widely accepted, but even that, right, has been sort of had some issues illuminated with respect to it. So what does it even mean to know something? We can't even settle upon a definition of that. But all these types of questions, lines of questioning, that's what we mean by epistemology. Metaphysics is like, what's real, what exists? Think like the Matrix type stuff. Dreaming, like, how do I know, like Descartes' going to ask this, right? How do I know I'm not dreaming right now? Because we've all had really vivid dreams, right? We're familiar with this. To the point where we're sweating, and then we wake up and we're like, oh my God, thank God that wasn't real, right? You guys ever woken up, but you're actually still in the dream? You didn't know it, because then you wake up again, right? So that's where it gets really trippy, like dreaming within a dream. The bottom line, though, is how do we really know that we're actually really awake, right? Because within our dreams, we feel like we do right now. Like, oh, this is obviously real. Well, then we wake up, So we had the exact same mentality when we're dreaming as we do right now. So how do we know we're not dreaming? Right? Anyway, all of that is kind of what we mean by metaphysics. The whole idea of thought, right? We have these thoughts. Are those material? Right? So this notion of a mind that has thoughts, right? What are thoughts? Are they material? Are they just, as the materialist or physicalist is going to say, are they just neurons firing in certain ways? A reflection or manifestation of certain regions in the brain working in certain ways, right? Is that what thought is? It's just another material phenomenon? Or is it something like the dualists are going to suggest that, hey, it seems to be indicative of some other distinct type of substance or existence? It's not material. It's because, after all, material stuff seems like it's public, right? We can all see it, taste it, feel it, etc., right? Whereas, fortunately, my thoughts aren't exactly public in the same manner. Fortunately, you guys don't know what's going on up here, right? There seems to be something different about thoughts versus like other material stuff. So are they really material? Okay, we're going to attack that question too, right, in section 2 of the course. All of that stuff is kind of metaphysics, right? So metaphysics and epistemology very much intertwined, right? If you think about it, when you say something about what we can know, you're at least implying something about what exists, metaphysics, to be known, right? And then conversely, whenever you're saying something about metaphysics, what exists, you're at least implying something about what we can know, right? So these are very much intertwined, but hopefully you can see how they're still distinct kind of interests and endeavors. One's interested in knowledge, the other's interested in what exists, what's really happening, how many types of substance are there, etc. Then we have logic, and we're going to spend a little bit of time in the next lecture. Because no matter what you're studying in philosophy, right, you're after the truth. Well, how do you get to the truth? Logic. right? That is the toolbox of the philosopher. That is the method, right? Logic shines a light on the truth, or at least that's, kind of how we would characterize it, right? It's spelling out what good, sound reasoning or arguments will look like, okay? And so we want to find those in these various philosophical issues. Which ones are the most convincing of these arguments? Okay, so that's why we want to be somewhat acquainted with logic itself then. Know what an argument is. Know whether arguments are any good, right? So that's why we're going to spend some time. Granted, this isn't a logic class. We're going to spend a little bit of time in lecture 2 on logic. And then finally, arguably the category or aspect of philosophy that most of you were probably most intuitively familiar with, ethics, right? We're all familiar with this notion of right and wrong, good and evil. Some of you have even taken my 203 ethics class, right? So ethics is concerned with those notions. Like, most of us in here are not moral skeptics. We believe that there is such a thing as morality, right? Well, how do we figure that out? How do we know there is such a thing as morality? And what serves as our moral compass, right? Or what should we look to for moral guidance in figuring out moral decisions? Right? What should serve as the moral foundation? Okay, that's what ethics is concerned with. These 4 traditional branches of philosophy give us a nice framework within which to address almost any philosophical question we'll encounter. In the next video, we'll start exploring these actual branches of philosophy, beginning with logic.